Hey everyone, my name's Tim Bray. I'm with the Identity Group of Google, and with me today I have Eric Sachs, who's the lead PM in the Identity Group and sort of our thought leader on this whole identity and login stuff. And you don't have to dig very hard to uncover a deep level of dissatisfaction in the user experience of the internet and how people feel about passwords and how this makes everybody's life online a little less pleasant than it could be. So Eric, how bad is it, really?
How bad is it? Well, bad and obviously getting worse. So there are different forms of bad. One of the stats I'll just throw out is on Google's side, we did a blog post a couple months ago where we mentioned that we've seen periods of time where a single hijacker using stolen passwords based on password reuse is trying to break into 1 million different Google accounts every day for weeks. And that's just a single guy, right? And the reason that it's getting worse and worse is password reuse. The hackers have realized, you know what, they don't need to break into Google anymore. And hopefully most of you all know this, they go and break into other websites that are less secure. And you know what, the press has started to talk about this more and more, and those of us who run websites are probably starting to feel more and more embarrassed. To be honest, Google and a foundation called the OpenID Foundation, we want to ratchet up that embarrassment level a little bit. There's actually a website the OpenID Foundation is putting together called accountchooser.net. And if you go there, you'll notice on the left is a link for this users page, which has a lot of visuals and text explaining the password reuse problem, because we find for the average non-technical user, they don't really appreciate what's happening. And for those of you who are watching who don't, the general idea is that the attackers don't go directly to banking websites, Google, social networks, and try to break past all of our security layers because we have lots. Instead, they go to websites where they might be able to even break into the back end of the websites, get the password lists and email lists of these websites. And now that they have those, great, now they can go and try to use those against websites that have more valuable information. So that's the first problem, is this password reuse thing is making it easier for these hijackers to get accounts. The other worst thing is that they're making more and more money from it, which is the next thing this website talks about. It gives the example of the hackers sending fake mails to the friends and contacts of someone whose accounts they've taken over, tricking them into saying, oh, I was traveling, I lost my wallet, I can't pay the hotel bill, I know we haven't talked in a while, will you wire me money? And people do. It's embarrassing for them, they lose a lot of money, it's embarrassing for you, your friends are tricked, and this is because of password reuse. And if you read the press, our best advice to end users is, well, use a different password at every website. And I don't know about you all, but I'm embarrassed if that's the best advice we can give. And so this is where Google and other companies are trying to help websites move away from that model and to using identity providers.
Well, I think we've got pretty good consensus that the best way out of the password trap is to go to federated identity and use identity providers rather than building your own fragile infrastructure on your own site. So is it that easy? You just push a button and you're doing federated identity?
Yeah, I really wish it was, to be honest. As soon as we get to the point where it's that easy, we're going to be more aggressively getting this message out as the industry to put more pressure on websites to make that change. But I'd say right now there are two classes of websites. One class of websites who gets value from identifiers, not just for getting rid of passwords, but actually they get other values from API integration from these identity providers. So social login is a big example, enterprise API integration is another one. For those websites, sure, it's a lot of work to support identity providers, but they got a lot of bang for the buck from it, not just getting rid of passwords, a lot of other API value. But what about all the rest of the websites? They may be just trying to get out of the password business. They're not ready to do all that fancy API integration. So for them, a lot of work, not as much value. And in fact, what we find is they don't even recognize up front necessarily how hard it is. There are hard problems that lead to a lot of users calling help desks. And that drives websites crazy because it drives up their costs. There are also really hard questions and edge cases deal with what we refer to as account linking. So you may have seen this yourself. You go to a website that added one of these buttons for login, you click it, and the website says, oh, you have an existing account here. Why don't you go through this wizard to bind your existing account to this new account and connect them together? Building those flows and handling all the edge cases is a lot of work. Now, fortunately, there are vendors who are starting to provide software and services to make this easier. So in fact, this same website, accountchooser.net, it has a link for website owners, and down at the bottom, a link to more information about identity providers and vendors who can help. And we're getting better and better at this, but not to the point that it's easy. We're also doing further optimizations to the protocols like OpenID Connect and other tricks to address some of these user experience problems and make it simple. But to be honest, that there is still some ways to go.
And bear in mind, the cost of not doing it, as you pointed out, is still pretty high.
Yes.
So, where do you start? What's the first step?
So there, at least, there is some good news. It's a website we referred to. It's called AccountChooser.net, and you might be wondering, okay, well, what the heck is AccountChooser itself? What we found is that to address these problems that websites are having, I mentioned one set of problems is users calling help desks with confusion. A lot of that is around the user experience. And so the industry, actually a bunch of what we like to call backstabbing competitors, Google and others, have actually developed a user experience we're happy with that actually helps a website who's purely password-based, not doing anything with identity providers. And once actually a website has deployed that, they didn't really like that, then it's actually pretty easy for them to do staged deployment of identity providers in a more controlled manner. But before we talk about that, Tim, why don't you just run through a demo?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite little demos. I've got this little website called favcolor.net that does one thing. It remembers your favorite color. And when I go there, you see this thing. This is not favcolor branded, except in the right side of the screen there. This is the account chooser. It remembers all the accounts I've used to log into one thing or another. So you can see I have my personal address, textuality.com, and I can log into that using Facebook. And it went to the Facebook IDP, and it says, oh, I know your favorite color. It's this nice royal purple. Well, let's turn it into a lurid pink and save that. So that's now my favorite color, a lurid pink. So I can switch over and log into that same textuality.com email address via Google as opposed to via Facebook. And it goes to Google, and pop, there I am logged in with that sort of puce, whatever favorite color. So what you're seeing there is one-click sign-in with the aid of an identity provider. Now, Account Chooser, as Eric says, works even if you don't have an identity provider. It still helps you log in with passwords and so on. But I want to show you one other thing, which is in the Account Chooser, you see also I have access through my Gmail account here. Now, if I click on that one, it says, oops, I haven't been there before. So Google pops up and says, is it okay to do this with this account? And I say, yeah, sure, that's okay. And it goes back to Account Chooser. Now, if you look carefully at the fine print here, it says, we don't know your favorite color, so we're picking one at random. So what I was showing you there was not one-click sign in, it was one-click sign up, which is starting to become possible with the combination of identity providers and front-end technology like Account Choosers. Now, we're not there yet. Account Chooser is available. We're still working on technologies to get it better bootstrapped for a better end-user experience. But it's really starting to be a potential reality. So we do make progress.
Yes. And so one of the key things that Tim mentioned is, while this works great once your website is in this future world with identity providers, think about a website who's still doing everything with passwords. A user comes to a site like this one, they click an email address that the operating system, the browser, or whatever it is, and there are cross-platform ways to do this, knows are frequently used on this device. The user clicks their email address, that email address comes to your website, and now your website gets to start being smart. The first thing it can do is say, oh, I've seen that email address before, so let me ask the user for a password. Or it can say, well, I haven't seen it before, so let me show a sign up form, let me pre-fill the email address and get the user to fill it out. So all of a sudden, you've at least avoided the need for the user to remember sign in, to sign up, and you've avoided the need for them to retype the email address, which, especially on mobile devices, is a huge win. It ends up, this is a very small amount of work for websites to get deployed, and I think Tim can speak to that. However, what really becomes powerful is now you get to do what we call percentage experiments, this sort of controlled experiments with identity providers, where what you could do on your website, say, you know what, let me pick all the users who are, say, Gmail email addresses who start with the letter A. And anytime someone comes to my website and clicks an email address that meets that criteria, then what I'm going to do, as Tim described, I'm going to bounce them over to Google, use Google as identity provider, and bring them back. And I was mentioning before that the industry as a whole is working to tune the user experience and technology. Google supports the latest versions of OpenID Connect. And in fact, in that, there's this optimization we have where the website can say, I already know the email address the user is using. So let me start a flow with Google and tell them, hey, I already got the user's email address. I just want to know whether that email address is logged in here, yes or no, nothing like that. And that's what Google responds back. We just respond back to the website, yes or no. And if the website sees yes, then it says, oh, okay, well, the user clicked the email address they wanted. I know they're logged in that email address. Let me just log them in. There's no user experience change for users here. They just go to the site, click the account they want, and instead of being asked for a password and then logged in, they're just logged in. So you can do this with, like say, a small percentage of users and start to see, okay, does it impact other parts of your website? And then you could try to, say, delete passwords from some of those users, and you'll probably find things on your website that do break. Your mobile apps might be hard-coded for passwords. Your account management page might be hard-coded for that. And you can go and start tracking those things down, fix them, get it changed, and then over time add support for more fancy things like identity providers who are not email providers, who are social network providers or enterprise providers, etc. And so we believe that most websites who want to at least show that they are starting to get out of the password business, this is the first step you can take. Because as Tim mentioned, for all you know, next week is the week that your security guys are going to tell you you've been hacked and you have to announce to the world that everybody has to reset the passwords. That is huge brand damage. Somebody's getting fired. If you can at least show that you've taken this as a first step and you're headed in the right direction, that's a good level of insurance, that you can buy yourself without doing as much work, and sets you up to do some of the experiments we provide as the industry and the vendors in this space try to work to make it easier and easier for websites to make this change.
So we kind of know what the future looks like, and we are actually providing something of an on-ramp. Start working here, and that's where you'll get there. One thing that's worth saying is that while Google is standardizing on OpenID Connect, this technology we've been showing you would work with a legacy provider that uses SAML, or if they were using Mozilla Persona or something like that, it would all fit together that way. So that's kind of a snapshot of where we are. Frankly, we're not in a terribly good situation, but I think we do have a pretty clear vision of where we need to get to and the first few steps to take to get there. So I think that's about all we're going to say today. Do we have any questions there that we should be looking at from people watching out there? Nothing really?
All right.
Okay.
They're all going to take our advice.
That's right.
I'd say one last piece of advice is say, if you're listening to this, hopefully you have some of your own ideas in this, and a lot of the work in this area are done in organizations like the OpenID Foundation, like these OAuth community, OpenID Connect community, the AccountShoes.com working group, etc. All these groups are looking for feedback, in particular from websites, to tell us what is hard for them, what is keeping them from getting out of the password business. We've spent a lot of time the last few years running events all over the world to collect feedback from websites about what it takes to get them out of that business. We think we've identified the key problems, the key themes, but if there's some issues we didn't talk about here, please take a look at some of these resources on AccountShoes.net, OpenID.net, etc. and let us know, either your suggestions how to do it better, or what are some of the problems that we haven't solved that we should as an industry.
Because we haven't solved all the problems yet.
Nope.
Lots more
not
left.
Yet.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.